public who wish to speak to something that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. Please make sure to raise your hand and I'll be sure to give you time to speak to the board. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions or comments or concerns. I'm not seeing any hands going up. Nobody has called in. So I will take that as there is no public comment. Moving on to business item 6A, consider and adopt the meeting schedule for the year and discuss remote only and or hybrid option.
So Andrew, you all are familiar that each April you set the meeting schedule for the year. Andrew had indicated that he wanted to have a full-blown discussion. Typically, you have just kind of approved meeting on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month at 6:30, but wanted to open up the conversation to all of those different variables to include the frequency, how often you all are meeting, and the day of the week, the start time, and then we need to figure out if we're going to continue to be fully remote or hybrid. As you can see in the memo, I have put some points out there for discussion in terms of consideration of moving to a monthly meeting. I won't reiterate those. And of course, I think that will lead to the rest of your conversation of day of the week, start time. You can go fully remote for the remainder of the calendar year if you so choose, but also you can switch back to hybrid at any point. I think I'll leave it at that and open the rest for a conversation.
Thank you, Brad. Why don't we just start off with what we have on the screen here in terms of frequency, whether or not to maintain the schedule of 2 meetings a month or prepare for one meeting a month. Love to hear some initial reaction.
My initial reaction is that we have a ton of stuff going on, going down the road here, particularly looking at renovation of Lincoln Hall and some of the other projects. It's hard for me to imagine doing it just with 1 meeting a month, unless you had a really crammed meeting. And I think it could cause problems because you could have decisions that need to be made, can't be made for 2 or 3 weeks until you have that 1 monthly meeting. On the other hand, I would certainly, I'm sensitive to the fact that we have 2 interim managers and they've got a lot of other responsibilities. So I'm completely open to ideas to how to lighten their load. But I just think that having meetings delayed just 1 month, you could just have a lot of decisions that need to be made relatively quickly, particularly things around capital improvement, and inevitably some other issues are going to come up about regarding some of the projects we've got going this year. And to see things just get pushed off for a month, I think could get us into some trouble. But just my opinion.
Thank you, George. Others?
Andrew, if I could just chime in real quick to piggyback on George's, please make the decision that's best for the board moving forward. Wendy and I are not going to be here long term, and it's only going to be a few more months. We're ready to advertise this position, I would say, in the next 3 weeks or so. So please make just don't use that as a criteria.
Thank you for that, Brad. Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I'll share some of George's concerns. I wonder, I was trying to think in my head of specifically what we have coming up. And on the one hand, I thought, having fewer meetings once might work some months, and some months it might not.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there's a way to kind of look at what's coming, maybe predict, for instance, as an example, the manager hiring process. So once we have some candidates identified, You know, if that 2-month period around that process, there was one meeting to free up other time to handle that process, to meet with the candidates, to do the community work that we're doing around how that process will play out. Meeting department, you know, whatever responsibilities we have around that. The other option I was wondering is, you know, this is a little more hinky, but every 3 weeks, try to reduce it a bit. But the only other serious suggestion I had was to make it sort of dependent on when. So maybe, you know, we've got May and June coming up. Maybe we do one each for that. And as we start off the new city, we look at what the workload is, or we go vice versa. In the summer, we do one a month and see how it goes. I'm not having a solid handle on what's on the list for future agendas. I'm a little in the dark, I feel like, in that respect. So.
Well,
Thank you,
if I could just jump back in, I mean, and I agree, it's hard to predict, but as Raj just said, the manager recruitment process, you could kind of anticipate that there's going to be we've got public committees that are kind of grinding through this, but quickly we're going to need to probably be making some decisions, and we want to move that process along. And one thing that occurs to me is we can always cancel meetings. We can always say, hey, there's nothing on the agenda, or maybe, we can always not have a meeting. And I would certainly be interested if we can get ahead of things in the summertime to try to cut back and only have one or two, have one meeting a month in in July and August perhaps. But I just there's just so much uncertainty in the coming few months. I just don't know how I feel about this.
Thank you, George. Amber, your hand's up. Go ahead.
With everything that's been said, added points, I would prefer to have 2 meetings a month. And again, as George said, cancel if there's nothing on the agenda, but shorter meetings rather than having a longer once-a-month meeting is my preference. And just as an aside, the hiring committee met for the first time alone this week. We have developed kind of a timeline which hasn't been fine-tuned yet, but we're looking at like the end of July for the decision to come back to the trustees. So I know there's some conversation about that, but that's kind of the plan. We're still fine-tuning it based on what the recruitment committee does, and obviously it'll further be defined once we have some candidates.
Can I just ask a quick, Amber, do you mean the decision coming back to the trustees as to who?
Yes.
Okay, so you kind of, by the end of July, so you kind of figure mid-June to that point is finalists and that process.
Yeah, and I
in
think
rough terms.
Yeah, and I think what'll happen is once we finalize that timeline, I think there'll be communication. There needs to still be communication back from like our committees to the full board as to what's happening in the committees. But the recruitment committee has decided on a time frame for when they're going to have a job posting, and we kind of worked back from that to end the September 1 date to have somebody in that seat.
Okay.
So based on that, that's what we're looking at. But I think I had some concerns with whether that's something we could do in one meeting or not, but that's another topic for another conversation.
Great. Thank you, Amber. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. I would prefer to have 2 meetings per month rather than one long meeting. Also, I agree with a lot of George's comments and discussion so far. As far as the day of the week, Wednesdays, the third Wednesday every month is the regional planning meeting. So that would not be a good day, but for me at least. I'm kind of open as far as days go, but Tuesdays seem to work well for everyone, I thought. it's not right after the weekend. So if something comes up over the weekend or whatever, there's some time to address it amongst staff and others before we actually meet, just in case. That's my only thought.
Thanks, Dan. Go ahead, George. You're muted though.
Second, got to unmute there. When we talked about this before, one suggestion I had was that we could have a typically structured meeting, and then have one meeting which is just business only. In other words, consent agenda, warrants, all the stuff that's in the reading file. We could have one meeting a month that handles all of that, and then the second meeting is just any issues, any business things, any decisions that have to the manager or that have come up in the meantime. I mean, I'm not saying that's what we should do, but that's a possibility for, in a sense, reducing the workload of staff to get that, because then they would only have to get all of that bureaucratic stuff together for one meeting, as opposed to doing it twice a month. That's it. And I'd be happy just having a consent agenda once a month in the warrant file, the warrant approvals once a month, if that made things easier.
Great. So I'm taking away from this that trustees are looking for keeping the schedule as it is to keeping it scheduled for 2 meetings in a month. Along that line, one of the things that I can do is work with Brad and Wendy on the agendas themselves. If there are opportunities where we can cancel a meeting, then we can certainly do that. And so Brad, you, Wendy, and I, when we get together before meetings, we can talk about what's coming up and see if there are opportunities to either cancel them and or move things around if possible. At the same time, something that might help with overall planning for what's coming up for our meetings. What we used to have with our joint meetings with the previous management was that spreadsheet that would have the day of the meeting, where the meeting was, and in that right column was generally who the minute taker was. While of course we care about our minute takers and who those are, I wonder if instead we could utilize a day of the week and have the topics that we know are coming up, so that way we as trustees can better understand what is coming up. I think also the public could better understand what's coming up, and that may help with planning, as well as whether or not we could cancel something, and or if we're well prepared for something that might be 6 or so months down the road. Thinking about things like in our transition to a city, having the renovations to Lincoln, hiring a manager, as well as transitioning to having a DRB. I'm assuming there's going to be a fair amount of work that needs to happen to make these things finalized. And so I can certainly understand trying to keep 2 meetings scheduled, but should the possibility arise, cancel it and enjoy a night off. Raj, your hand's up, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. Although it probably won't directly impact our work during a meeting, we will have quite a bit of zoning to talk about since cannabis passed from here. Ideally through that same time frame, because after that we'll have to put a committee together. We'll have to put some process together for approving retail licenses. So we've got that to work out. We've got the lot to implement. We've got various other things. The other thing I was going to put in there was, so yes, I agree with the 2. If we can cancel one, great. I'm just going to put a plug in for Wednesdays as opposed to Tuesdays, not only for the reason that I've mentioned before, but now there's some other just family commitments from other people in the family for Tuesdays throughout the summer. Maybe we can try this for the summer, see how it works out, reevaluate after Labor Day or in the fall, and see if it worked for people. If it didn't work for people, we can revert. So I'm just putting a plug in. It doesn't have to be the 3rd Wednesday. It could be the 2nd and 4th. Those don't seem to conflict with any other boards or other things. And Brad put channel 17 in his memo, which is not something I considered when thinking about this. So thanks for that detail.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, and just to touch on something that you just touched on. Oops, hang on a second. I just lost everybody here. You still there, guys? Okay. We are going to need to convert our zoning board and planning commission to a DRB and a planning commission. There's going to have to be reappointments. And I brought this up before, where I would like to do it. I think there's some leeway in what in the division of labor there and how we organize things. And also they may be looking to guidance from those two commissions. Those two boards might be looking for guidance from us about the size of their, because there's flexibility about how their meeting schedule and their size. And that all has to be done fairly soon. That's not, I think we need to try to have that in place by 1 July. So that's just another example of the kind of thing that is probably going to preclude us from just having a meeting once a month.
Thank you, George. In terms of the day of the week, one of the things that I had raised, and Raj, you and I talked about this as well. The desire was to try and get away from the school board meeting dates, especially those members of our community who want to be able to attend school district meetings as well as attend our meetings. It would be nice to not have to have community members pick which meeting they're attending. So that was certainly the intent. And the thought of Monday was, well, if being an independent city, there's no need to worry about what the select board is doing, and we could meet when they meet. As well as if we have then joint meetings, they're already set up at that point in time. But since that's not a possibility, what I'm wondering is, would the board, Raj, with what your comments are, I'm open to Wednesdays and taking a quick look through our committees that we have in the community. It doesn't appear as if there is another committee that would meet the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. Would that be something the other trustees could do with their schedule, or would you prefer to keep it on Tuesdays?
I'm fine any day of the week, but Dan, when does the RPC, when do they meet?
Third Wednesday of every month is the RPC meeting.
Okay, so as long as we avoid that conflict, that'd be fine for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I mean, getting back to the whole thing of in-person or hybrid or completely online meetings, I'd love to see the hybrid meetings continue.
So going back to hybrid instead of fully remote? Amber, any concerns with Wednesdays?
No concerns.
Okay. Raj, it seemed like you were getting ready to say something.
Thank you, though. No.
Go ahead, Brett.
I mean, obviously the consensus of the board is there, and so I hesitate to even comment, but I think I would be remiss not to. I think I understand and agree with all of your points, and I guess I would encourage you, just as Raj said, maybe to regroup at the end, in September about Wednesdays. I would encourage you to regroup about frequency then. I understand there's a lot pressing. I think when a new manager starts, it's a great opportunity to move to once a month. For the community, the people that potentially could be interested in running for trustee, I think it's pretty daunting to be meeting twice a month at 6:30 p.m. Certainly, if you have younger kids in your family, that poses a pretty serious challenge to do that twice a month. I think we probably exclude a fair number of people from considering being a trustee, given the amount of time that is required. I think also it demands a lot of following from the community when you have twice a month meetings. Where's the agenda? What's in the packet? All of those things. So I think reducing that impact on the community to follow the meetings and what's happening. If they only have to do that once a month, I think it's better for them. In terms of the manager, as I wrote a lot of these bullet points, but I am reiterating, if you truly, which I think, we've had some conversation, I think you all envision a manager who is out and about in the community, who's active regionally, who's representing us in Montpelier, who, has a bigger role. I just can tell you from the last 6 weeks that doing meetings every other week and trying to accomplish all of those things is going to be challenging. And so a reduction in that meeting schedule will free a manager up to do some of those things that I think you all would want him or her to accomplish. So I agree there's a lot upcoming, and I think let's go ahead and tackle all these things. And but I think when the new manager starts, I would encourage you to at least have the conversation again and just see if things are different. I think there's never a time where everybody's going to look into the future and be like, well, we don't really have much to do this year, so let's just move to monthly. I think there's always going to be the excuse, oh, now we have a new manager. Oh, we're in transition year. Oh, the 2 Lincoln renovations are actually happening. Oh, it's our first year of being a full city. Like we can project for the next several years all of the things that you're all going to face. So I know change is hard, and I know there's some personal preference of trying to reduce the length of meetings. But again, I think you're such an efficient group, and I don't think it would mean double the length of meetings. I think you all would recognize that we're meeting once a month, and let's try and be a little bit more efficient if our agendas are a little bit more hefty. So I said my piece, and I appreciate you listening, and you can move on, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Do appreciate all of those points that you raised, and you're 100% right. There never is a good time, and there will always be something coming up that makes it feel pressing and daunting with the workload. Totally hear that. So from what I think I'm hearing from the trustees is the desire to change from Tuesdays to Wednesdays, the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month, having the meetings be hybrid for the foreseeable future, and when possible, being able to cancel the meetings. We'd only have it once in a month. Amber?
I think one of the reasons that we had put this on the agenda was to ask Brad and Wendy what their thoughts were on the remote versus hybrid. So I don't think Brad's talked about this, so I'm just curious to hear what his thoughts are. Obviously not wanting to add anything more to his plate.
Thanks, Amber. I appreciate that. It's fine. We've brainstormed some solutions to town meeting TV is actually willing to take on just a few little things like opening up the building and unlocking the door and locking the building at night. Some of those things that would extend the meeting for a little bit on either end. So we're good.
That's good to hear.
I do want to just jump in, Andrew. I think I would almost, and I know we don't have a masking in the buildings policy right now. Things are getting a little more serious in the COVID realm. If we wanted to give it a month, I don't think that'd be a bad idea. Or we can consider making those in-person attendees mask for those events. I don't know how that would work, but I do know that things are going up again, and what the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks look like are a little unknown. We'll talk a little more about that when we talk about purchasing masks, but I'll just throw that out there for the hybrid. I am anxious to get back to doing some in-person things, but in regards to our meetings, but I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you. Thank you, Raj. I would certainly want Brad and Wendy to weigh in on if we were to require masks in the buildings, just in terms of the employees who are there and what impact that may have on them. Please don't take that to mean that I'm against the topic or against having masks in the building. That's not at all the case. We just want their perspective. And so if you're okay with it, I prefer for that conversation to happen. I can talk with Brad and Wendy about that, and we can go from there. So trustees, anything else on this topic? not, we do have a recommended motion.
I'll move that the trustees, let's see here, the trustees adopt the meeting schedule for 2022 through 2023 with meetings occurring on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month, starting at 6:30 p.m. And that the meetings are hybrid, and then move, or no, sorry, I guess just leave it at that they're hybrid.
Thank you, Dan.
Second.
Thank you, Amber. Is there any further discussion? Please note that, we can always change this should anything in the continuum of this pandemic change or otherwise. This can always be revisited when necessary. Motion's on the table. It's been seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Great, so passed unanimously. Thank you all. And going on to.
Sorry, Andrew, I just don't know if you, obviously the motion is passed, but I didn't know if you wanted to see if there's any public comment.
Oh, sorry, just going right through things. Yeah, if there's any members of the public who wish to address our meeting schedule, please feel free to raise your hand. All right, not seeing any hands up. So going on to the city manager's job description and starting salary range.
Yeah, so the two committees are working on recruitment and hiring, but I think it's the role of the trustees to define the job description and the salary range for the manager. There is an existing, there are three different iterations of job descriptions included in the packet. We already have a village manager job description. I think either we should update that or adopt something else, and then also talk about the salary range. There's some information here about salary range. Currently it's way too low of what's in the personnel regs. It's listed to start at 92, and the midpoint would be 107. You could see in here in your packet, there was some other communities and what they're starting at. I can tell you that Winooski just listed theirs within the last couple of months, starting at 118, 750 to 134, 375. So I would encourage you to try and be where is appropriate to be competitive in the marketplace and attract managers, probably from other smaller Vermont communities who are ready to move up, or assistant managers or other folks regionally, knowing what else is out there.
Thank you, Brad. So why don't we start with the job description, or actually, how about, since it's first, it's maybe a little bit easier just in terms of the memo. Why don't we start with the salary portion and then go into the job description? I totally agree with you, Brad, about ensuring that we are able to attract someone who is talented, would also feel valued, and not somebody who would come into the role and then quickly leave. So yes, would want to make sure that we are competitive. Also, just really appreciate that the salary would be listed in the posting. Don't want to have somebody opt out simply because of being uncertain. So to get the conversation started, I would not be opposed to, I think that's trying to find where it said in the memo. So with the starting salary range, are you talking about sharing both the minimum to the midpoint? Okay. I think saying 105 to the 130, I think that's a good starting point. I think that also keeps the midpoint within what is currently budgeted. Other thoughts?
That's what I thought too, Andrew. You read my mind. I thought that was about where, and using the same logic, that's about where we are right now. And that's what we paid Evan, and that was for someone who was answering to two different boards. So I think that's about right. The other thing, if you don't mind me just going on, I think although we want someone dynamic and energetic and talented and all that, the fact is that I don't think, relative to other communities, I don't think the challenge of being a manager here in Essex Junction is enormous. I think we have a pretty good track record. We have a pretty good crew of department heads, and we tend to keep things on an even keel. So it's not like we got to really get out there and try to spend a lot of money, because we get all kinds of problems we want someone to come in and solve. So I would agree with you that 105 to 130 is about right, but I could be persuaded to go a little higher maybe.
Thank you, George. Who's next? Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I was somewhere in that, on that line or the one above it. So, and for the same reasoning. To kind of address some of what George got to, we are kind of what we are. Yes, we're not looking for someone that needs to come in and solve a lot of problems, but I'd love to take this opportunity to get someone in to do some innovation and to have some new approaches to things, and to bring some fresh ideas and bring the village in some new directions. I think the community is excited to look at this opportunity to maybe do a little bit of reexamination over the next 5 or 6 years, and really step out and define itself in really interesting ways. So I'd love to see whoever we get be able to handle the day-to-day, but also, as Brad alluded to, having fewer meetings, be out in the community and really engaging on some innovation, some new ideas, and looking what can, take our new city into exciting and different directions. So maybe that's a lot to find in the next couple of months for the first go around, but I really hope that if we get this job description and ad written well, that we'll get some really interesting candidates that can do that. The one thing I did do is because Winooski just went through this, I looked up what they had put in their ad and what they were dancing around in their job description. What is not in a lot of these examples that we have tonight is any kind of mention of, city manager taking on the role of setting a tone of being inclusive and welcoming. And City of Winooski, in their ad, which is not the job description, I realized, said the successful candidate for the Winooski city manager will be a champion of equity and inclusion who is able to bring all voices, especially those who are traditionally excluded or underrepresented, into the decision-making process. I'd love to find a way to think about that in terms of the job description, and what, if we are going to try to make more time for this new city manager to be truly representing our community by being out in the community and doing things outside of Essex to represent us, I'd love for that person to have some stated goal around this, or stated expectation. I played with some wording, and I'm not sure what our process is tonight, if we're actually wordsmithing anything, or if we're just being asked for input. I don't know that we want to get into a wordsmithing situation, but if not, I kind of trust Brad gets it and could find a way to add something like that for our review later. And again, I'm not even sure if the recruitment and also the hiring committee have had these discussions and what they've come to on this topic for for that answer. So it's very important to me. I've heard from people in the community, it's important to them. Certainly this work's been going on for a couple of years. And, like I said, we have an opportunity to do a little bit of reimagining who we can find, and understanding that there's a lot going on, and we do want to find someone good.
I do agree with you, Raj, about not necessarily wordsmithing tonight, but instead getting the general topics and trusting that Brad and or others within the committee could take what our thoughts are and put them into paper. If we could first settle on what that minimum midpoint for the salary are, I think then we can transition into that conversation as to what are some other things that we'd like to see different and or added to that job description. So I think George and Raj and I are okay at that 105 to 130. Amber, Dan, see a thumbs up from Amber. Dan's flickering good, I think. Great. So then, yes, if we want to go into that job description side of things, having some statement about diversity, equity, and inclusion, really helping to be a champion, at the same time also helping to lead the culture of the municipality, helping to lead the staff culture, and to really ensure that when somebody walks into what will be City Hall, that it is that warm, welcoming environment of true customer service and here to serve the community. Something in that range, I think would be good. When we talk about the responsibilities, much of it is outlined within our charter. Our charter definitely says what the manager's role is. And so as long as we don't have anything competing against that, it's good with me. The only thing that I wanted to propose in here as well, in the desired education, it talks about a master's degree. There are plenty of people in our community, broadly used that phrase, who don't have a master's degree and would be very well suited in this role. So I would certainly be willing to entertain a bachelor's degree instead of a master's degree. And I do appreciate how this doesn't say 4 to 6 years of being a municipal manager. Because again, just because somebody has not been a manager does not mean they would not succeed in this role. So those are my only thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree, Andrew. I don't think a master's degree is required, and I think we would. I think it falls in the realm of being desirable but not required. And I think we probably want to loosen up some of our other knowledge, skills, and abilities. I think we generally put it out there, but we say, if someone is an outstanding or has done an outstanding job in one field, and we think they're going to, but they don't necessarily have to have that specifically have worked as a municipal manager. And if I can just digress a little bit, just to go back to what Raj was saying, I would leave right now. I think the two committees are going to be doing a whole lot of wordsmithing, so you may want to wait to see what they come up with. They may solve your problem for you. And I think the other issue that we talked about was that we would say in the job description that it would be someone who had been in municipal, who had been in municipal administration, but not necessarily a municipal manager.
Thank you, George. Amber?
Again, I don't want to wordsmith, but one thing that I did notice, that unless I'm missing it, there is no mention about attending night meetings. And I know in the past, that was one of those things that we used to put in all of our job descriptions when I worked for the city.
And it absolutely is a requirement.
Yes, so it would definitely go in the knowledge, skills, and abilities section, I believe. Kind of where the ability to travel to meetings in other parts of the state section is.
Roger, Dan, anything else? Okay.
Well, I will just say, sorry, Andrew, I will just say that the town example we have here seems much fresher than the last village go around. It definitely read a little more for sure current. So I'll just add that.
Yeah, if the date on this is February of 2013, so it's been a little while since the village / soon to be city has really had this opportunity since the last go around. Great.
So Andrew, I have two clarifying questions. One is based on Raj's comment, do you want me to build off from the town manager one?
I think the village manager one is written more like an actual job description. I'd like to spice it up, but I don't know how to spice it up, honestly. Because it's just boring. These things are boring. And I'd like it to be more attractive to people as they're reading it, but honestly, they're just boring. So.
And just to clarify, this is the job description, not the job ad.
Right.
So there certainly is a difference. The recruitment committee is working on the ad, which will have, a bit more flowery language. And
George, can you get some spiciness in that ad?
Spice.
Definitely, we're gonna make it really spicy.
George is getting into ad copy now.
Nice. Go ahead, Raj.
I guess the only thing I'd say is as far as what you asked, Brad, it's definitely the town one is definitely less specific. So if you see any glaring omissions, work them in, I guess, to make sure that as opposed to the ad, this is what we're going to be judging the performance of the manager on. So we need to be able to look back after the first year and reference all of the all of that work. So we don't want to leave anything glaring out, and we want to be specific without being, without boring Amber. Because once we bore Amber. So.
And my second question, Andrew, is based on the education conversation. Do you want it just to read bachelor's degree and then master's preferred or desired, or no commentary about master's?
I'd say no commentary on it. I understand how it may be preferred, but I think that's something that we can keep to ourselves. If it is preferred, personally, it's not. Depends on that holistic view of the individual.
Okay. And my last.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my last question is, do you want me to go back and make these edits, or does one or two of you want to go back and make these edits? I'm fine either way. I just want to get your preference.
I would say if we're going to ask somebody to do some good writing here, I would look to one of our writers or both. Amber?
I was not volunteering to write.
That's Amber.
I don't know. That hands up.
You did.
Just for the
Amber.
record.
Don't move.
I was
Just
just
kidding.
gonna ask if Colleen had any thoughts on this job description.
It's a good thought.
And maybe she wants to volunteer to write some of this.
Be great to have her do a first pass. Or
Especially because she's not here, so we can volunteer her.
That's even better.
That's the rules.
Amber, the
Happens to be fun
professional
with that.
deflector.
I'm a lawyer, come on.
So Brad, if I can go back to one other thing, I'm not sure if it was you, somebody mentioned about one of the committees possibly being involved with the job description. Is that the case of, okay, I didn't think so, because if it was, I like how one of the portions or one of the things that you let off with is that this is something that the trustees should approve, and I wholeheartedly agree. Would want the input from others, but at the end of the day, it is the trustees who will be supervising this individual, who will be making the hiring decision. So, great.
Okay, we'll make some tweaks and get this back to you. Do you want track changes, or you just want to see the final document?
I think a final document's fine.
Okay.
All right. Before we move away from this, we don't get this opportunity very often. Are there any members of the public who wish to make any comments on the city manager job description starting salary? If so, please go ahead, raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands up. So it looks like we are ready to transition into business item 6C and to discuss the annual meeting outcomes. And personally, I'll just start off with expressing my sincere appreciation to all of those thousands of village residents who came out and voted. Really appreciate you doing so. Whether coming out or voting in your pajamas at home in the comfort of your own couch, totally understand that. May have been there myself. Greatly appreciate you doing that too. I also really appreciate the overwhelming support for things like the budget, local options tax, the bonds. Really appreciate that, and it really helps to set our community up in a way that to move a lot of our priorities forward and to help make sure that things like our infrastructure are well maintained. So thank you. Oh, and we can't talk about the appreciation without mentioning, Susan McNamara Hill, Diane Clemens, and all the other, of course, our volunteers in general, who helps to ensure that voting happened, that the ballots were counted, that it was a safe environment to do so. So appreciate all of you who took time out of your day to make that happen. Thank you. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, Andrew, I think one of the things that jumps out about this to me, and just going back through the years, is Article 5. Every time we've asked for any kind of infrastructure project, a big, a grant, it always gets like overwhelming approval. And that doesn't, I'm not trying to draw out a lot of conclusions from there, just an observation. I mean, here it got the most yes votes of anything. And that's been my experience back through the years, which just tells us something that when we, it doesn't mean like we want to do this every year, but when we really do feel the need, it was a good idea to do this. And the community generally, whereas other things might be controversial, the community really does get on board and support big infrastructure improvement projects. So I think that's just something to make a mental note of going forward. And the other thing, obviously, I think probably for us, the two controversial things we're going to be thinking about are the sales tax. And again, where are we going with that? That's going to be a big project, and the cannabis approval. And again, how is that going to impact us? I don't really have thoughts about it, but I think that these are going to warrant some discussion. And again, going back to the initial point of, more or less trustee meetings, I think these are things that we are going to have to be dealing with in the very near future.
Totally agree with you, George. I know personally, I've outlined a couple of things for the local options tax, especially since it's something I've been talking about for quite a few years now, it feels like. But with that, things like our board will become a cannabis control board, the local cannabis governing board. And quite frankly, I don't know what that means. I don't know what it's going to take to do that. And so really going to need to rely on oh, who is it from the CCRPC? Raj, I know you know who it is. But that
Yes.
individual to help
been-
guide us.
There, I understand there's a group highly represented from CCRPC that will be working diligently to provide really good info to communities. I think a lot of communities are feeling like this was an interesting time. I'll say interesting to bring this up when communities are distracted and stressed from 2 years of COVID and mitigation and financial issues to then have to implement this and consider zoning, which can take an awful lot of energy, staff time, public input, meeting time, board time. I'm not going to lie, I'm disappointed that passed right now, only in the sense that we had an opportunity to do it again in August after we've been able to have these conversations. And so now I feel like we ought to really move so that we do have that understanding and we do have answers. And so I know Mariah Flynn and others at CCRPC are going to be active. And Dan, I know you're over there with the board. So any info you can bring back, I'll be working on it on the side. And certainly welcome community input and assistance. I think there's some opportunities there. I just think we need to figure out where, how, when, what does it look like, how many? That's a lot of big questions. The upside though is we got the local option tax, thanks Essex Junction, so that should retail sales happen, and we can leverage that a little bit for the community. So thank you for that.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, just a technical question, and maybe Raj, you can answer this. So in terms of the legality of it, I mean, I understand that cannabis is legal now, but retail sales will be legal in September of this year, October. I'm not clear on that. And does that mean that someone who anticipates opening a retail shop, they can start applying for the license right away, or do they have to wait until October to September? Do you have a sense of the timing of this? Does anyone know?
October's the retail sales month. I don't remember the
Okay.
exact day. We, as the local entity, and this is a very loose understanding, set up that process based on guidelines provided from the Cannabis Control Board, I believe. So I think there are some things spelled out into how that works. I don't have a date as to when if and when we're required to start taking applications for that. I don't know if Robin's back from, if he's here, but we should probably, when he returns, maybe we can gather, a bunch of people together, not a full trustee meeting, but and just kind of have a couple quick meetings to figure out what the lay of the land looks like so we can proceed. And that might include someone from CCRPC. It might include a member of the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
Just to be able to say, okay, all right, so here's the picture. Here are all the different elements.
Right.
And that's not a judgment on pro or con. I'm just saying these things are all, here are the tools in our toolbox. Here are the requirements. Here are what retailers are going to want to know. And so we can make sure it works smoothly. And at the same time, we have to ask the community, where in the village do you want this? Okay. How does that work? What is possible? What isn't possible? And that's a lot of what CCRPC is trying to provide in terms of guidance. With cannabis, they've made it in some ways more difficult. They've identified this one particular substance and said, you have to treat it a little bit differently, but we have to get our heads around what that means. If we tried to do any zoning, we probably have to do it to all adult products, which is fine. I mean, so that's what I mean when I say we have to have a conversation. We have to know the lay of the land. So it's going to be some quick research to figure out what our requirements are. I don't think it has to wait till July 1st. I don't think it's a fiscal year thing. I think it's once the vote happens, a clock starts. But I don't have 100% idea. Okay.
I just a quick technical dumb question again. So on this, does this mean each community can license one cannabis retailer, or could you have multiple, can there be multiple retailers in one community, A? And B, does that mean that we would be functioning, we might get, if we can only have one, but we have 3 or 4 applicants, then we have to come up with some, we have to make a decision about who gets it, and we have to come up with some rational basis for making our decisions. So
Right.
these are going to be some interesting times ahead of us.
I think it's multiple. I have heard 2 different things, and I haven't taken the time to look, to be quite honest,
Really?
as to whether it's in statute from the state or whether it's in a rule or whether the community gets to decide how many. I don't know. I know that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm almost certain it's not just one.
Okay.
Go ahead, Amber.
Just gonna say, I remember some discussion about April 1st, the start of application process. But frankly, now I'm like, I don't know what that means. So, but I know that was kicked around in the cannabis committee meeting when we had the last public forum on it. So I don't know how that's, I really don't know what that means, honestly. But April stuff started happening. Stuff was happening.
You know, I know the state is taking pre-qualification applications from potential retailers to get them sort of pre-qualified, which,
Yeah.
you know, as part of their process. You know, Brad, look, if you want to get some people together for a informal discussion, I'd be happy to take part in that during the day sometime. And I can see who from the Regional Planning Commission wants to make it.
I think
Just to get started.
Robin has had conversations with the folks at the Cannabis Control Board. So, I mean, that might be somebody too that we should be including.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Absolutely. What
Any
can
other-
I ask? Can I ask what's the next process for the local option tax? What's next in that? Does anybody know?
My understanding from here is the tax department basically needs to start collecting, or needs to, excuse me, where I believe the beginning of the upcoming fiscal year is when it would be implemented. So local businesses will need to be notified. My understanding is that actually falls within the state's tax department. But that was just based off of a conversation with Evan, and frankly, it's been a few months. Go ahead, Amber.
I kind of recall that we needed to have some conversation with the tax department too about scrubbing addresses versus the town versus the village. So I don't know who's going to have that, but I think that needs to happen as well.
Right. Brad, let me know if you need any help with that, or I assume you've all got that.
Yeah, I think we're good, Jess. I'll work with Jess on that.
Great. Any other takeaways, outcomes? It's like another boring year coming up. All right, next on the agenda, going to 6D and the mask purchase initiative. Brad, are you taking this one, or is this Raj?
Well, I'll just introduce it. Just, of course, you know, even writing this memo a week ago, things were different. But you all passed and supported making the purchase of masks back in January, I believe, at the time when masks were extremely difficult to acquire. As of, you know, probably 2 weeks ago, demand was way down. It may actually be up if we started to look again tomorrow, but I just wanted to confirm that the board wanted to proceed with this purchase, and also confirm that once there are receipts, if we do proceed, what you want to do in terms of distribution. You know, way back in January, we talked about getting them here in a mass distribution train and doing something either at the park or at one of the schools, and making them available at different locations. So I just would like to refresh that conversation and make sure we're headed in the direction that you still intend.
Thank you, Brad. Go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in and say, mask mandates are gone. We actually have until the end of this month if we wanted to redo another one. That's when the authority that we have expires. Brad, I'd say with the way things are right now, I think we should do a smaller purchase, more on the, you have two numbers in here, more on the lower end of the range. And as opposed to a mass distribution, we'll still have to prepackage some, most likely, depending on what we find, but we let the community know they're available, make them available to, as we discussed, any communities at risk. Let local childcare, food shelves, certainly our employees know that these are available, and figure out a way for them to retrieve them from us, and just keep an eye on how things are going. I don't think private and public entities are responding very quickly to the latest uptick. And I think, well, I can speak for UVM, being at UVM on campus, they've acknowledged that things are getting interesting and just asking people to be careful, but they haven't asked us to mask again on campus. But I can tell you people are starting to do more. This would traditionally be a time where if you're doing masking when it's bad and not masking when it's okay, this would be the time to start masking up. But so I think we should do an initial purchase and see where things go while we can get them, but certainly not go for a, $10,000 or $20,000 or 20,000 mask a jump. I think let's see what we can do to put them in the hands of people that are most at risk or that feel that they want them, and revisit maybe in 6 weeks or a month.
Raj, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially given the way that things are going at this point in time. So I will certainly support that. Trustees, any other questions, comments?
I agree with Les. I think it's a nice gesture for the community for us to provide masks for the at-risk population, but as far as spending a ton of money, I mean, a lot of money, $40,000 worth, at the time when things are worse, it sounds, but there's really no true way to assure that the masks, once they leave our point where we're giving them out, that they're being used properly or just thrown in the trash.
Can I ask, Brad, do you have any idea? I know the community got some surgical masks through PD. There was an allotment from the state for the town and the village. Do we know what's happened with those at all? They were a different style, obviously, but.
I don't, yeah, we did, and we had a conversation with PD, and they are available, and I don't know where that ended up, so I can circle back on those.
Well, then maybe we can start off on the low number and combine the two and ask people which they prefer. Because I think those weren't just for staff, they were for the general public as well. So maybe starting out with the 5,000 number, combining them with the ones from PD, people can get a choice. Do you want a KN95 or do you want a surgical mask kit, group? And then we see where we are in a few weeks, or revisit as needed. And if everything goes well, we won't need to do it again.
All right. Trustees, not seeing any of your hands up. If you're okay with it, we can move on. We can go to public comment on this issue. So Annie, I see your hands up. Why don't you go ahead?
Hey, thanks, Andrew. My voice is really shot, you guys, from working. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
I'm really sorry. So, on the regular, I'm always in a 95. Okay, not now, not my house. And I agree with Brad and Raj that the timing is really good right now to have a choice of ordering in bulk. I agree with Raj with not ordering as many as original. Um, lately, I've been handing masks out occasionally when people come in and realize the numbers are up. And it does not work to pass masks out that come in bulk in one container. And I've recently come upon an N95 that is individually wrapped that I think is a really good idea. And I'll email that. Thank you for letting me be in on the discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Eddie. Anybody else from the public? If you have questions, comments on this, please go ahead and raise your hand. Not seeing any other hands up. We have previously made the motion to approve of the allotment of funding, so I don't think we need another motion tonight. Now, so our next agenda item would be tree farm contracts. With this agenda item, I would say trustees for us, I'd like to have this conversation in executive session. But with that said, I do welcome members from the, or Brad, I suppose if you want to introduce a topic, I would appreciate if what we do instead is take some comments from the public. If there are any members of the public who have any questions, concerns, or things they want to make sure that we hear. But that I think that this conversation from the trustee side at least should be an executive session.
Sure. So there are three contracts that govern the 99 acre parcel called the Tree Farm on Old Colchester Road. There's a memorandum of understanding with the town of Essex. And then there is a management agreement with a third-party management group, the Tree Farm Management Group, and a lease with them on the property. All of those documents were set to expire on July 31st of this year, and both you and the select board passed motions to extend that to December 31st, since July is the middle of their season. The question is, what do the trustees want to do after December 31st? Both boards did pass the same motion back in November, I think it was, that that both boards were planning to extend these contracts for a couple more, 3 to 4 more years, and then turn it over to municipal management by the recreation departments. And so that's part of the conversation as well.
Thank you, Brad. So with all that in mind, members of the public, if there are questions, comments, concerns, you want to make sure the trustees here, please go ahead, raise your hand. I'm sure you have time to talk with us. All right, not seeing any hands up. So for the executive session, what we can do is we'll do that at the end of the meeting, so that way members of the public don't need to stick around and wait for us to come back. So we'll table this agenda item and go on to 6F, the annual review of the ethics policy.
So per the policy, the trustees are to review it annually. This is your opportunity to make any changes to the policy or just accept it. As I acknowledged in the memo, I think historically this shows up in the consent agenda. It's something you all read through. In looking through it, there's some language in section 11 that I only bring to your attention because I don't think we're actually adhering to it. And so I hate to have a policy that we're not following. So I just would love for the trustees to discuss the policy overall, but specifically address section 11 in terms of acknowledgements of the policy and how often it's reviewed and who needs to review it. There's a pretty cumbersome process that's outlined and it's not being adhered to. So if it's your desire to keep it that way, that's fine. We can put staff on that. But I would maybe appreciate some clarity if that's truly the direction we want to be going.
Thank you for bringing this up. I personally would say that I think if we do this at the time of somebody's individual appointment, that would make sense. I don't personally feel the need from either a risk management standpoint, or also then those of you in the staff who would need to track this. I don't feel that having this be done every year for all of us makes a lot of sense, especially when this also includes our fire department and the many members that exist there. I'm imagining it would be quite the logistical nightmare, to be quite frank. Amber, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
I agree. I think once a year or once when they're appointed, once when you're hired, is sufficient enough. I think I've actually brought this up in the past that the policy itself, I'm not really quite sure the distinction in why it's separated as an official employee, volunteer firefighter, as opposed to just municipal employee or some other definition that includes everybody, because there really is no distinction in the policy. I kind of, I know this is marked as approved in 2021, and I went back to look at the meeting minutes just to see, because I know we discussed this, but frankly, I couldn't determine why it was changed and what was changed. There are typos in this. I would love to see this revamped a little bit so that it's clearer. It may be and change, obviously, with the change of the village to the city, there are some changes that need to happen in that regards.
How about this? Amber, would you like to take a first pass at making changes that we could then discuss at a subsequent meeting?
You know what my customary response is going to be? Colleen's going to kill me, like hurt me. But
Why are the four of us smiling so big though?
I know you guys are so excited. I do think, and I'm happy to do that. But I just don't know where that line is. Like, because this is really like, I actually went on and looked at South Burlington's charter to see, what they had for, there is a specific section of this, their ethics policy. It just is easier to understand. This is just very cumbersome. So if you want me to, then I'm happy to do that. But I just don't know where that line is between what our role is and what the HR.
This is ours.
Okay.
This is 100% within our purview to make whatever changes or edits we so see fit. So we can do what we want with it.
Colleen.
Yeah, if we want to engage Colleen in this, and she has the time, the availability, and if Brad and Wendy as the interim co-managers would like for her to spend the time that way, then yeah, that can happen. So I would say that then, Brad, if you think it's okay for Colleen to spend some time working with Amber on this, I think that it would be good to update this, fix not only just the typos, but also just some of the logistical pieces. And if there is a way to streamline this process going forward, makes sense.
Great, that sounds good.
I think it also makes sense to kind of put this on like a July 1 timeframe so that it all kind of like happens with the transition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's traditionally happened now for when there is a new trustee that the new individual signs off on it. At the same time, there's also the new trustee is supposed to be sworn in. So I think there's ways that we can logistically make that work.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is that any changes are done before, so that they're implemented essentially for July 1st to coincide with the city. So it doesn't change that normal process per se. It just changes this particular revision. Because if we're not going to have people we're not going to have people renewing this on an annual basis. It's just going to be one time.
Right. When they're either appointed and or elected.
or hired.
Right. Any other trustees have comments on this? Okay. So I know that we have a couple of options for motions. I think that given the work that's going to happen, it doesn't make sense for us to approve of anything or to really make a motion tonight. But instead, Amber and Colleen will go work some magic with this document and process, bring it back at a later time. Thank you, Amber. And now going on to business item 6H and to discuss city celebrations. We're gonna have a party. Right? No, so close. 6G, discuss committee reappointment process. Got ahead of myself.
So just wanting some clarity on how you all would like to proceed with reappointments. There's about 11 or so people that we will reach out to see if they're interested in being reappointed to their existing committees. And so would love just to have a clear understanding of what you would like that process to look like so we can factor that into the upcoming meeting schedule.
I will say one of the things that I have enjoyed about this process is the ability to have some back and forth with candidates. While it doesn't happen often, there are times where just the ability to ask some pointed questions about, like for the planning commission, are you in favor of the downtown redevelopment efforts? And making sure that our committee members' personal desires, philosophies align with ours, I think is important. And so being able to get at that in these interviews makes sense. At the same time, I also recognize that not everybody is good at coming to answers off the cuff. And so I do think it may make sense for us to come up with some scripted questions to have candidates at least be prepared to come in front of us and talk with us, because that can certainly be an intimidating thing as well, and want to try to make that as easy and smooth and friendly as it possibly can be. So those are some of my thoughts.
Hey, Andrew, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah. So I'm not clear. Are you saying anyone who gets reappointment is up for reappointment, we would have them come before us and we would ask them these questions? Or I'm not clear, or only new people that we're appointing?
I think it makes sense if we're going to appoint somebody that we have that conversation with them.
Okay.
Whether if it's a reappointment or not. With that said, someone like John Alden, longtime planning commission member, who we generally know that he's in favor of what's going on, and that conversation may be vastly different than a new member.
I mean,
Does that make sense, George?
Yeah, well, I just think that for some people who have been on committees for many years, and you mentioned John, and we could mention a bunch of others. Are you saying they are, if they want to maintain their seat, they're going to have to show up in front of the board of trustees and answer these questions, or are you going to make this piece optional?
It's a good question. I'd say let me think about it a little bit, and would love to hear from some others as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Raj.
Well, framed that way, I would worry that would come off as a lack of appreciation and be taken as disrespectful for the time that they've given. Although I was right on board with you. I can't think of anybody right now, and I certainly wouldn't identify anybody anyway. we're in a weird place. Sometimes we have trouble getting people who want to put the time in, who, have the time to put in with the knowledge. And once we have them, it's awesome. Some people, this could be an opportunity for them to reevaluate. Are they doing what they intended to do? Are they getting the work they intended to get done? Is it something they really want to do? And I also question sometimes the reappointment without seeking other input from other potential candidates. I don't have an answer to that, but it does strike me as a blanket reappointment without opening the position again to another candidate after a 3 or 4 year term, or whatever the term may be. I think that's something we should consider as well. Do people just get reappointed even if they answer our questions, or do we open it for another interested person to come forward and say, no, look, I've got these ideas for this, and I'd like you to consider me. And I will say that if we're going to get some diverse viewpoints and get new people involved in general, simply reappointing the people that are already here is just going to elongate that process, and we're not going to see any change in that realm. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm not saying one way or the other, but if we're not welcoming new people into the process whenever we have an opportunity, I think we're, in the long term, we're probably shooting ourselves in the foot. And again, the risk is that comes off as being disrespectful to the people that have put in the 1 or 2 or 3 terms and all that time and effort and are still interested. And that is not the intention, but I do wonder if it should just be a pass. So that's my input.
Thanks, Raj. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I hear what Raj is saying, making some good points for opening it up, the appointments to new candidates, but also it could get contentious, I think. And for us as a board, it's not like we go to the people for re-election, they vote, and as opposed to having the reverse where a board is saying, no, you're done. But I hear what he's saying. I agree. We just, at the start of the meeting, we're discussing going to 1 meeting a month. If you're going to go down this path and talking about interviewing people, you're talking adding meetings to our schedule. This is going to lengthen the process. So, I mean, I hear what everyone's saying, but on the other hand, I also realize that, it will take time.
Does anybody have any other thoughts?
I guess I would say I'm fine with reappointing people through an expedited process if no one else puts an letter of interest in, let's say. And just because someone else puts a letter of interest in doesn't mean that that's the way the board goes. It's an evaluation. I don't know. I'd be curious to see what other communities do and how that works for them. But my whole intention around thinking it this way is to bring more people, different voices, and really identifying those seats that have been held by the same person for 3 or 4 terms. And again, I don't even know if that's, I'm saying this without knowing if that's, something that is happening a lot. So I apologize for not doing that homework.
Maybe term limits is a good thing.
Or not so much term limits, but reevaluations after, it doesn't mean that they're not going to get, we could have 3 people show up for the same seat, but clearly the person that's been there is the right candidate. But to just make it a de facto thing seems odd as well.
Just one thing I don't have the exact number, so I'm not going to be able to quantify whether there are a lot of people who fit this bucket. But the zoning board, for instance, the members of the zoning board have been on that board longer than I've been a trustee. And so that's also a board where you need to have a fair amount of technical knowledge to be able to make a determination, where having some level of tenure makes sense and can make a board more efficient, while at the same time, yes, that does then mean that there are no new voices making that decision. So I only offer that just as an example. That is also a committee that is currently underappointed. I don't believe as of now they actually have a quorum. So there is also that. George, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Andrew, one way of getting around, or not getting around, but of on the one hand, getting feedback from committee members and providing that opportunity, but on the other hand, not getting around the complexity of inviting a whole bunch of committee members to trustee meetings, is maybe what we could do is go to their meetings, go to one of their meetings. For example, go to a meeting of the Bike Walk Committee, the Planning Commission, and just go around the table and ask each member to answer these questions. If they answered them in private or just one-on-one, the way it's being proposed here, they would still be, it would still be a public document. So, I mean, that might be a way for us to achieve what you're looking to achieve here on the one hand, but to make the process more efficient and maybe even be the catalyst on some of these committees to have that kind of a intergroup discussion. It's just a thought.
Also, along that line, what would you all think about if we were to ask for those who, again, this is only for reappointments, and I realized my first comment was talking about both reappointments and new appointees. So I may have started things off with a confusing way. For those who are seeking a reappointment, I don't think it would be asking too much to ask them to answer 2 or so questions. And I like some of the ones that Brad, you've provided here about what have you enjoyed, and something around what are you, like, why are you seeking reappointment? What is it you hope to accomplish? I don't think that's asking too much of those seeking reappointments, where they can submit that. And at that point in time, we as a board could say, yep, this is good, we can reappoint them, or we could say, let's have a little bit of a further conversation.
I don't have a problem with it. It's fine if you want to do that.
Any other thoughts on that? If you'd like to think for a little bit longer, I saw Annie put her hand up and down a couple times. Happy to go back to public comment and while trustees take a moment and think. So why don't we do that? So members of the public, if you have thoughts on this topic, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll make sure to give you some time to speak with the trustees on this. Go ahead, Annie.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. You might be able to hear me better if you can see me. I feel like we're in the middle of this huge thing, right? That we just did. When I say we, I mean you. Well, right? We did this enormous thing, this historic, enormous change. And quite frankly, although it obviously will affect me as well, this discussion, these questions that are being offered here, we really should be looking at committees and perspective and what committees we need, creating efficiency and getting outside the box a lot and making sure that the committees are functioning as they should some of them be merged. I think you should just shake that, I shouldn't curse, I almost did, I'm sorry. Shake that stuff up and find out what, yes, it might be offensive, it might be confusing, but done respectfully and done properly. You could ask people to submit a short video that they could do on their iPhone to answer these. I don't know, I'm making that up. But really, we're in a moment in time that is so historic that to worry now, and I don't mean to be offensive because I really do respect the opinions, but this is a time to do things that might be different and unique and maybe, yes, hard. But this moment in time is not going to come again. And you already got so much work being done. Our community has fortunately chosen Raj again, as should be. And we've got the right team in place and the trustees to do the work that would engage our community in ways that make it clear that the committees we do have should function as they do, or changes should take place, or roles should change, or committees should be added. And I think that to not look this in the eye and do it would not speak to who we are as Essex Junction in all the work that we've just done for the past year and before. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Annie. Go ahead, Harlan.
Yeah, I don't really see where it comes off as being offensive. I feel like doing our due diligence, all checks and balances are good. I kind of look at this as a review process. I like some of the questions that are posed here. What are 2 significant things that you feel like you've accomplished while you've been there? What are you hoping to accomplish as you move into the future? What are the things that you like about it? I feel like it bothers me to continue to reappoint people without doing basically a review of the work that they've done, a minor review of the work that they've done, and see if they're still enthused about it. As Annie was alluding to, we're moving into a city. I think there are some big hopes and dreams and excitement. And as a resident, I don't get the opportunity to go to a lot of these meetings. There's so many meetings and so many different committees. It'd be nice to hear somebody that's being reappointed, what they feel like they're accomplishing and what they're hoping to accomplish to move forward in a meeting that I do attend on a regular basis. So I think it's a good idea, instead of just doing a blanket reappointment, to have them come and introduce themselves to the new members, to the city residents, and to be excited about being on the board that they're on. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Annie, is it a new hand or is it a holdover?
I'm embarrassed, but also feel strongly that I want to mention one more thing. It's a new hand. Can I?
Go ahead.
Harlan's statements just reminded me that when I was fortunate enough to be on the EDC, that one of my ideas and goals was to bring committees together, and it would not be a bad idea in some form. Harlan, I don't know if that's what Harlan meant, but it made me remember that a concept where there was committee crossover or a committee, like just something that it brings energy and it brings enthusiasm to committees that might be, I don't know, I'm talking too much, but anyway, I think that anything that brings forth committees to engage with one another and to engage with the trustees and to engage in a public space that, like Harlan said, we are already going to be at, can only be good. Thank you again.
Thank you, Annie. Roseanne, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, building on what Harlan and Annie had to say, I believe very strongly that there shouldn't be any automatic reappointments, that if somebody wants to be reappointed, considered for reappointment, this should be their part of the interview process, but that all the jobs should be posted. And if you don't get other candidates, you don't get other candidates. But if you do, then, the current person would be, interviewed using these questions and the other folks, whatever your standard process is. But I mean, you spoke about how you want, to use the opportunity for a new city manager to be dynamic and new and changing things. And I think to just automatically reappoint anybody without posting the position is not consistent with that. And I would not like to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm not seeing any other hands up. So coming back to the trustees then. Go ahead, Dan.
So I agree with the comments, Annie and Harlan and Roseanne, as far as having people come back to the board. And it's not an automatic thing, but we really, we'll have to sit down and come up with a process, make sure everyone's treated the same. I don't want to see, it's difficult, because it's going to be addressing people volunteering to be on boards for different, purposes, whether it's bike walk or the planning commission or the zoning or the any of the other boards we have that are out there. But to basically come out with the reason why somebody wouldn't be reappointed after we interview. I just want to be consistent.
Thank you, Dan. Go ahead, Raj.
I am unmuted. I guess I just reiterate that I think there's a middle ground. I think we ask these questions of the reappointments and we open up the position, but we let the community know. It's not like we're going to get an avalanche of interest, unfortunately, but we are now providing stipends for people to participate on these committees. That word's just starting to get out. They're modest, but they're effective, I think, or they're something. So yes, I think we do what's proposed here. We open up the possibility for other people to interview as well, and we make our decision as we're supposed to. And I think it can be done respectfully. Provides a check and a review and an opportunity for another conversation, I think, like you said, and Annie and Harlan said as well. So that's the path I think we should try to go down. Plus, I think for some of these, we're going to be needing to backfill and recreate, right, George? I mean, we have a DRB and zoning is depleted. So I don't know that we're talking about a huge note. There's 11. Half of that's probably bike walk. So yeah, my process would be going through this review, what's outlined there in the memo, and opening the position up to see if anybody else in the community wants a shot at it.
Thank you, Raj. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I guess my only thought about it is that someone may not, right off the top of their head, may not have answers to these questions. And when they really think about them, they may not have, they may be perfectly happy with their committee. They may be doing great things on their committee, but they may not be able to give you specific answers or give you elaborate answers here. And are they going to understand that there's maybe an implication here that if you don't give us good answers, maybe you're off the committee, and that's not what we're doing here. So it may be the questionnaire saying we would like your responses on these questions and anything else you may want to say. But I'm just concerned about someone not really having a particular answer to, for example, anything you think the trustees should know about your committee. They may not have thought about it. They may not really have anything to say about it, but so then their next step is just to make something up, which it doesn't do us any good and doesn't do them any good. So I'm just saying, just put a little bit of, maybe try to put a little bit of slack into the language so that they know that it's kind of open-ended. That is, they don't have to give us specific, and this isn't a test.
Wholeheartedly agree with you, George.
Just to go, and Raj, I think just to go back to the DRB and Planning Commission. Yeah, we're dissolving the zoning board, and we're going to have to basically create two. We're going to have to recruit new people, because reconfiguring the zoning board and the Planning Commission isn't going to get us there. We're going to have to get more people in, and I think it's going to be a bit of a project. We're going to have to lay it out about what those appointments mean and what the process is and what the difference between those two committees is. So it's probably a little, it's going to be a piece of work getting all that done.
And I wonder, George, as an aside to that, I wonder if it's going to take us helping to provide some training for those folks to get up to speed on what this all means, not to mention us, but
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And I think, if you don't mind me digressing in the middle of your issue here, Andrew, as I said before, I think it might be reasonable to get someone from the Regional Planning Commission to come in and talk to us about it, and maybe have some of the planning commissioners and zoning people and other interested parties present, so we can really get a good sense of what's one and what's the other. But it is a little bit pressing, because I think we do need to have this up and running by July, which isn't far away.
And look, I don't want to belabor this whole topic, but I know what you're saying, George, about not making people feel like they're on the spot. Though any of the folks that are going to go through this new process should get a letter in advance saying this is what the new process would be. So they shouldn't be really taken off guard. And anybody that can't answer these 3 questions, somebody else comes forward for a new position that can and does it better. I mean, maybe that's what we're looking for, honestly. And I don't have anybody, I'm not saying anybody in mind, but I don't want somebody who doesn't want to put the time into thinking about answering these 2 or 3 questions to sit for another term on a committee that they've been on for 1 or 2 or 3 terms, when someone else can come forward, put new energy into it, answer these questions in front of us, and get the job done. So I guess there's a number of ways to think about it, but I guess the bottom line is, whatever process is put forward, I don't think it should just be an unadvertised blank.
Fine, I'm not arguing. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like having reappointees come back to the trustees for a conversation in the notice that they will need to come to the trustees. I do think it would make sense to provide some of the questions that we see here well in advance, so that way the appointees have that time to reflect, think about it, jot down some notes, so they can come and be prepared and are not just shooting from the hip. Plus, I also think that does a fair amount of, or provides a fair amount of respect to these individuals to ensure that they have the time to think about it. It's only fair, I would say.
And Andrew, sorry, can you just round out the rest of that conversation? So it feels clear to me about reappointments. I guess I just want to clarify where we ended up. So it sounded like Raj was saying we're going to advertise all positions that are expiring. So all 11 positions will be broadcast community-wide. And then if you're already on the committee and you're interested in reappointment, we'll send them an email with a link to a form that has these questions. Do you want them written, or you just want to notify them that if they're interested, these questions will be asked of you?
I think it should be optional. If somebody wants to provide written answers in advance, they could do that. If they want to provide a recording of themselves answering these questions in advance, they could do that as well. But they would still need to come to the trustees for a bit of a back and forth in case we have follow-up questions from their responses. In terms of advertising positions, I'm hearing the same thing, that all existing positions would be advertised. I think it's important to also note that for new individuals applying, if somebody wants to apply for more than 1 seat, given the fact that, again, as George has mentioned and we mentioned earlier, with a new development review board, with the vacancies that we have, someone may express an interest in multiple seats, and it could be good to think about where people are at and where strengths may lie.
And so it sounds like there will be a standard set of questions for those seeking reappointment. Do you similarly want a standard set of questions for those who are new? Different questions, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that what you offer here provide a good outline of why are you seeking an appointment, what would you hope to accomplish, those kinds of things. What concerns do you have? And I think that, these are the starting points. These shouldn't be the final questions. There may be something that somebody says, and we absolutely have that capability to further question the individual about what it is that they are saying in case something else comes up.
And sorry, I just want to make sure I get this all right. And then, so with those 2 or 3 questions for new applicants, do you want those answers in writing, or again, you just want them to know that these are the questions? You would welcome them to submit them in writing or do a video, but either way, they will be coming to the trustees, and these will be the areas of interest.
Yeah, they can submit them in advance if they'd like. If they do, it doesn't help. If they don't, it doesn't hurt. So any of that would work.
You know,
I'm-
I guess I'd say for some of those questions, Brad, you know, that's sort of like, some of that is what you'd expect to see in their cover letter request to be considered. You know, I mean, it's not, and that's sort of how it could be phrased for people that are applying for an open position. Please include in your cover letter or your letter of interest, you know, some of the following information, you know, like it doesn't have to be a short answer quiz, but it, you know, we'd be interested to hear why you're interested, what experience you may or may not have, what you'd like to do with it, blah, blah, blah.
Trustees, any final comments on this? Thank you, Brad, for bringing this forward.
Sure, yeah, we'll probably bring it back next month just to make sure you're good with how we're going to proceed.
Great. So going on to the next agenda item, we have the City of Essex Junction celebration and 6H. So please excuse this very brief memo. Work requirements did not allow for much elaboration, but basically what I was trying to get at here is that this is a once in a lifetime, once in 100-year opportunity. I think this is absolutely a time where we may want to make a big deal out of this. It's the creation of the City of Essex Junction, where we have had many community members who have put in their own time and effort to help make this happen. And I'm sure want to be a part of helping to celebrate this opportunity and to celebrate this accomplishment to where we are. I also know that I think all the trustees were copied in an email from Our Village, Our Voices, and that members from Our Village, Our Voices are absolutely interested in helping be a part of crafting this process and helping to figure out where we go from here. We just wanted to have this time be an opportunity to get this conversation started as to what we as the trustees would like to see happen in this effort. George, did you want to kick things off?
I'll kick things off, Andrew, by 2 thoughts. I mean, I think obviously a big community celebration would be awesome and terrific. I'd like to just throw out the thought, though, for the trustees and staff, for us and for the staff, it's been a rocky 3 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And I'm wondering if there'd be any interest in just having, in addition to the community celebration and all the people who helped get us here, if at some point we don't want to just have a reconnecting event between trustees and staff to talk about this and you know, as a separate celebration or just a separate get together. And I'm not wedded to the idea. You know, since we're just being creative, I just thought I'd throw that out there. The other thing I note is that July 1st, which is when we officially become a city, correct? Is a Friday. How fortuitous, you know? So Friday is a great day for a big celebration. So just that wouldn't be a bad idea. July 1st, like our own local Independence Day.
That's why we did it for 2023 or for this year, because it's on a Friday.
That's right.
All
the whole
coming
point.
together.
With regards to the staff celebration, from those that I have heard a lot of joy in terms of where things are going. Some weight being lifted off of the shoulders for sure. I would be very supportive of it as long as staff wanted it. I wouldn't want it to feel like, you know, the forced party with a boss for those who have had that fantastic experience. But rather the opportunity to truly celebrate should be a celebration and shouldn't feel forced. So I'm all for it if there's a way where it wouldn't feel forced. Brad?
Yeah, just we talked with the leadership team and are planning to do a staff celebration probably on the Friday of the week that the governor signs, and we would be more than happy to have the trustees there, and it would not feel awkward. You're not an awkward governing group, so we would welcome it.
Oh, we were, but okay.
No, Roger, awkward in other ways, or that's just me.
All right, right. Those ways.
Go ahead, Amber.
I love the idea of having the community gathering either at Maple Street, do some hot dogs, burgers. My only question would be, because we are butting up against the 4th of July, which is a large event for staff, is that going to pose any problems?
I was going to bring up EPD, for instance, like what
Yeah.
kind of notice and situation would that put them in with the 4th being 3 days away? I love the idea of OVOV taking this on as a planning process. We probably need to give them a budget.
From what I saw, I do believe that they would be more than happy to. Again, thank you, Brad, for bringing this up to the screen. One of the things that I do want to make sure with this is OVOV was created in a way to really take us out of decision making and to take us out of the planning process. I am certainly not opposed to doing that. This again, we're never going to get to have this opportunity again. So if the trustees do want to be involved, I want to make sure that we all have that opportunity to be involved should we want to. So I wanted to make sure that we had that intentional conversation. So I didn't want to take that away from anybody.
Maybe the way we could do that, Andrew, is to have them come up with some ideas. We can all think about some ideas. They can present what they're thinking to us soonish. And we can come to some kind of a, hey, that's a great proposal. Have you thought about this? If we even have any input, and what do you think the proposed budget would be for that? And then we can, because again, I'm assuming they're going to need some money. This celebration will need a budget. So maybe they'll need that in advance, or a ballpark in advance. I can't think of for myself, I can't think of how I'd want to be involved except to maybe include some kind of cornhole tournament. But I think I've been promising that in one shape or form for 3 years. Didn't work as bribing the merger decision, but
I think you would also promise sticky buns.
I was totally just going to say that.
I did make some killer chocolate chip cookies today.
Gosh,
Such a tease.
this is why we're going to have hybrid meetings.
They're like this big.
So I'd be happy to reach out to Elaine and others from our village, our voices. What do you think about? Do you think proposing having them come, say maybe May 11th, would provide enough time to have them do some initial brainstorming, come back with some proposals, and we can talk through that then?
I think that works. I think your comments, Raj, about a loose budget would be helpful. I mean, it's one thing if you're planning a party with $2,000 and it's another if it's with 20. I did reach out. The village people are 35 to 40,000 for a concert, in case you're interested in bringing them in.
Very, very interested. Forget the masks.
I think just a general ballpark would be helpful for planning purposes.
Brad, how much would fireworks be for that? Do you know?
Our current show is now up to, I want to say $14,000 a year, which is a pretty decent show at this point.
Does anybody think it would take away 3 days in a row or 3 days apart? Or would that be, I mean, this is like a once in 100+ year thing, you know? And of course, that would be, you know, even more of a logistical issue and probably involve the fire department. So there's some questions there about like feasibility for our. And of course, you know, that July 1st means it's the new agreement with the police department. So what does that mean for a special event we didn't warn for EPD in the agreement?
That agreement won't be in place yet, so you're still good for the transition year.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
2023.
Well, one other thing is dependent on weather, obviously, and a rain delay ties it around the same time as potentially the 4th of July. And then what do you do? I mean, whatever, right? You know, who knows?
Yeah. Something to consider.
These are some good initial thoughts. So yeah, I will reach out to our village, our voices. In the meantime, trustees, if you have other thoughts or ideas as to things that we could do to help celebrate on July 1st, if you want to send them to myself, I'm happy to filter them out from there.
Great.
Look forward to this opportunity.
Brad, did you need a number tonight, or can they come up with two? Do you think you got that? Is it something they could be like, you know, this is 15 and under, and this is 20 to 25? I mean, are those numbers even realistic for us as a group? Where would that come from? Economic development?
I mean, you have ARPA, so you have 3.2 million in ARPA.
A lot of fun.
I think getting a pulse of the board right now as to what you would be comfortable. I mean, if they come back with a $40,000 budget, are you okay with examining that, or do you need it to be somewhere different? I think being clear about that just changes the entire conversation when they're planning.
I think, I'll speak for myself just to get it started. I think that this is that once in a lifetime, once in 100-year opportunity. This will not happen again. I think if we were to start off or to say, you know, a not to exceed of 40,000, I think that's worth it. I think that it's money well spent, time well spent. The other thing I just wanted to mention again, when we talk about that penny on the tax for economic development, it's about downtown revitalization. And so we need to be mindful of would that align with the intent? And for me, I think I'd rather stick with use of the ARPA funds.
I'll just speaking to what Andrew said for an amount, I guess I'd entertain let's see what that proposal would look like and judge it based on what's in it and see where we go from there. What does that sound like? Is that just too much, or?
I think that it makes sense to get that conversation started with that and see what it can result in. If all that means is we can only get the village people, then I don't know. I think we need something else.
Great. I think that's very helpful for them.
Great.
I know there at least Gabrielle is here, and there may be other members of the public that want to speak. If you guys are good, Andrew.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. If there are members of the public who do wish to address this topic, please raise your hand. I'll make sure that you have the time to talk to the trustees about it. Not seeing any hands going up. This was for discussion purpose only, so no need to make a motion. And going back to the agenda, that brings us to the end of our business items. And so we are on to the consent items.
I
Motion to
move we accept the
consent
consent agenda.
I think I heard Amber go first. Somebody want a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Raj. Any further discussion?
Yes,
Oh,
it's a sure sign of spring when the trustees have to approve Mr. Dingling's vending permit. And I mean, Raj, right? Am I right? Okay. I just wanted
As
to
long
point
as
out,
as long as the dingling's bringing the warm weather, I'm good.
I mean, it would not be springtime if we weren't approving this permit. So I just wanted to point that out. It's great to see it back on our agenda.
absolutely. Great. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. Great, so pass unanimously. Now we are into the reading file, board member comments. The only thing I wanted to mention, I've been asked quite a few times over the last few days about when the governor is going to sign off on page 491, whether it's at his desk yet, and just a general update. And as of this afternoon, the bill is still going through the process that it needs to go through to get to the governor. So as of now, it is still going through the very normal process. This is not any kind of a delay, but it's working its process from the legislature to the governor's desk. So that 5-day clock has not yet started. Those are all my comments. George, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Andrew. Sue McCormick must have been reading my mind because I was going to ask, and Sue sort of reassured me that this was the right thing to ask. And it has to do with the pocket park in front of the Firebird. As far as I know, where we left off, we own the property, we have a plan, we have the money, and Andrew, as you just said, it was money that was designated for downtown improvements. And in fact, I went and looked at the initiation of that fund, and it was for improvements in the downtown, in the village center, such as pocket parks. So that it was specifically mentioned. So as I understand it, this went to, for the final approval, it went to Rick Hamlin's office for engineering approval. And then it was supposed to come back to us, but that was several months ago and it hasn't come back. So I would like to make a request that we have something on our next trustee agenda about this.
Yeah.
Either do we have the Rick's final plan to move forward with? If not, when can we expect it and what exactly is holding it up? So I would like to make that specific request because boy, wouldn't it be great to get that done this year? And finally have, and as I've said, and as Sue pointed out, we have to provide public space. You can't do renovation and be bringing all these people and have this residential density in our center and not try to provide some kind of public space. So we need to do it. It's good planning. It's something we committed ourselves to a long time ago. It's time to get it done. So please, can we try to get that on the agenda for our next meeting? Thanks.
Thank you, George. Any other trustee comments? Brad, anything you wanted to raise from your perspective?
I should have made a list, but we have a candidate for the Communications and Strategic Initiatives Director position who has accepted, and she is planning to start on May 2nd. Her name is Ashley Snellenberg, and I will get some more information out to you, and we'll work on a press release. She is moving with her family from Arkansas, and so we're very excited to have her. The bulk of her experience over the last 8 years or so has been as a communications person for a couple of different school districts. So not exactly municipalities, but obviously similar line of work in terms of public communications. That's probably the most interesting and pressing thing to share at this moment.
Appreciate that, Brad. Thank you for the update. And it's wonderful to have more people come into the community, call it home and call it a place to work. So if there is nothing else, we have one last agenda item that we will be doing in executive session. Thank you for putting these motions on the screen. Does somebody want to go through and make these?
Make
I
a
can do
motion
it.
that,
Oh, go ahead,
Oh.
Dan.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I move that the trustees going to move forward recommendation in the matter of the executive session following recommendations. I move that they find that premature general public knowledge regarding the village's contracts for the tree farm facility with the town of Essex and the tree farm management group would clearly place the village at a substantial disadvantage because the trustees risk disclosing its negotiating strategy if it discusses the contract terms in public. And then the second motion, if you want me to do that one right now.
Yeah, keep going. You're on a roll.
Okay. I move that we go into executive session to discuss the contracts for the tree farm facility with the town of Essex and tree farm management group under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes and include the interim co-managers and EJRP grounds and facilities director.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, George. Any further discussion on those two motions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. So that passed unanimously. So public, we're going to go into executive session. We will adjourn right from there. So no need to stick around. Thank you all for coming out tonight and enjoy the rest of your evening.